Hey, there's no shame in trying things that people ain't never tried before.
I walk often, either in the woods or pacing a 5-foot circle in my room. I walk to reflect and imagine, and I use music, primarily sometimes other things, to frame my reflection or imagination. Blade Runner 2049 was a pleasant surprise because it didn't feel like a film to watch, but rather an invitation to think for a couple hours. A grand frame. Almost. man, man. Asian guy sees campfire. A grand frame exploration, a frame kit. They provide you a set, a soundtrack, both to guide your thoughts, frame your perspective, your experience, and questions pre-packaged for you to ponder. Good questions, actually, which the story was structured around. It didn't seem the movie raised the questions, but rather the questions prompted and raised the movie, which I very much appreciated. It shows. And I say that because there is a larger story going on in the universe, which the movie could have easily focused on, but rather, we are focused on an average Joe and his story in the bigger picture, which is really a non-story. He's a side act, forgettable, forgotten in history, and yet shit's happening. And he serves as an unsettlingly relatable blank slate for us to project ourselves onto and explore his problems as our own, as they would be our own in his shoes. These problems, these questions, are all related to experience, genuine experience, the validity of experience, and individuality, the validity of individuality. Nothing particularly new, but masterfully done all the same. The theme, the core theme, is as present and monolithic as the soundtrack. The questions are posed early on, and each scene following, rather than providing answers, explores different facets of the questions. It's like twine. A scene happens, something happens in the scene. You get a little more information, you unravel the problem a bit more. Another scene happens, which is just scenery and gorgeous setting and nice soundtrack, and you think. And then another scene happens where something happens and you unravel a bit more, and then you follow that cycle. And then finally you unravel everything, you reach the core, and you go, wait, did I just sit here unraveling twine? Why am I doing this? And then you look up and Blade Runner 2049 is standing there. And you say, Blade Runner 2049, I unraveled the twine. And it shrugs its shoulders and goes, Yep, yes you did. You unraveled the twine. And then, just like it did for what felt like half the movie, it just ends and leaves you alone with your thoughts. In many ways, it doesn't even feel like the movie ended. You know, it's the same cycle. You're living the same cycle the main character did. You're not the hero. You're not the protagonist. You're not the one anybody cares about. You're just someone getting by, encountering problems, dealing with them, and reflecting on them until you can't anymore, until it ends. And while I sort of expected it, and the twist didn't exactly catch me off guard, it sorta did, and I was pleasantly surprised, just like I was with the entire movie. The entire time I was sitting there thinking, based on what I was seeing, you know, I think this movie has balls. I think it's actually gonna do something uncommon. But you know, this was a reboot from Hollywood, so it was equally likely that it wouldn't. But it did. Paid off. If you haven't seen it, go give it a watch. You won't be disappointed. It's one of the few movies I've seen in the last 2 years which I don't regret spending the money on. And with that, we're going to start talking a little bit about the story now and my interpretations on the things, because it's coming up on 2 weeks now I haven't talked to you baby boys because I've been busy. And it's in the wee hours of the morning now, and I kind of feel like just having a little one-on-one, a little man-to-man with my main men, you know? Talking about the serious issues, like that feel when no AI GF. So I watched none of the promotional material for this movie before I went in. I went in mostly blind. I didn't even plan on watching it, really, because again, it is a reboot from Hollywood, and we know how tasteful and tactful and talented Hollywood is. Now, I didn't watch his review, and I still haven't. I wanted to make this video with my thoughts as best I could, as clear as I could, my frame uninterrupted. But I heard Horseboy Supreme offhandedly in one of his videos say Blade Runner 2049 was good, so I figured I'd give it a try. And it was good. I was pleasantly surprised. How many times have I said pleasantly surprised in this video, I wonder? I liked how they questioned individuality's validity by degrees through manufacture. Going in, they assume you, the viewer, believe your experience is valid. So they introduce you to the main character, who is not human, but pretty close. They make it clear quickly that he is not human, or at least his consciousness is not supposed to be valid. I don't kill my own, I don't ask questions. But in this, it's important to remember we are projecting ourselves on him. He is our avatar. We don't ask questions. That's what the filmmakers are implying. And I think that's what they're implying with everything. I think their message is kind of dark, and it's disguising itself as an optimistic one. But we'll get into that. Hold on. Gotta loop that music again before we can continue. So, Joy, the AI GF, the next layer of manufactured experience. Now, while she is the question's next extension, we aren't projecting ourselves on her. And as such, the movie kind of dicks with her pretty regularly. For example, interrupting the rain scene, exemplifying her as a as a piece of technology, an entertainment thing above all else. And that scene was only made possible by buying a product for your product. And for the entire movie, up to and including her death, she is the one pushing the K is unique angle. She's saying what we want to hear, that he is special, that we are more than just puppets dancing on biological strings. But then, right there towards the end, almost immediately after the twist, in the scene that really made me want to watch the movie, because what's better than AIGF than giant AIGF? What you want to see, what you want to hear. Now, while the question could have been just as, if not more powerful without the scene, because they littered the Joy advertisements throughout the entire movie, that scene is to make sure you don't miss it. To plant that seed of doubt in case it wasn't already there, that what she was saying was not true. She was saying what she was programmed to say. Or at the very least, or even more correctly, I'd argue, that she was thinking and acting the way she was programmed. She wasn't programmed to say those things specifically, but she was programmed to think and act in a way which would lead to her saying those things, to making the main character, to make us feel special, even though it is completely fucking wrong. And that makes us question whether or not she, Joy, as an individual, was valid, whether or not just what she was saying, whether or not it was true, but if she was true. Now, I'll argue she was an individual, but she was following programmed logic, very obviously, which kinda puts a damper on the whole thing. Is it love if she is programmed to love? But remember, while an AI, a product, she was the extension of the question. So back it up a little bit. Technically, we are programmed to love too, aren't we? If you didn't have a cock and balls or a pit between your legs and a brain which drove you towards sex, could you really love your significant other? Not would you, could you? But you see what they're doing, right? They're using her to ask a question about him, to ask a question about you. This movie is all about you. But the twist that Kay actually is just a fucking nobody, a smaller pawn in a larger game that we and he will never see, makes this all work, makes it so effective. And that twist is doubly effective because the real twist seems to be that the twist is not a twist, right? You're led to believe that Kay is the child. But if you're paying attention, it's obvious he isn't. But because Hollywood is so formula-focused, you expect them to disregard that and make him the child anyways, but they don't. Like I said, they have balls. They made him a nobody. They took that protagonist role away from him, away from you, which is dangerous. You just paid between $5 and $25 to be immersed in a world where you can be the king. This is the fantasy world, and you're the king, and they're just gonna take that away from you? And they did. They actually did. They took a risk, and it paid off. It was surprising because it was unsurprising. If they made Kay the child, if they let Kay be the child, like they do in most movies, in most pieces of media, they let the protagonist matter, be special, have a beginning, an end, follow the hero's journey, then the questions would have been answered and there wouldn't have been anything to think about. But that's not true. That's not how humans work. We can answer the questions in stories because they end and we have complete control over them. But in reality, we don't have the answers. The Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest stories in civilization. And its whole premise is that no man can ascend. Everyone dies. And there's no escaping it, and nobody is really special. Even the greatest, mightiest, wisest, most charismatic, most special kings. Everybody dies, and nobody is special. Nobody is above mortality. And everybody is so afraid of that. Afraid of familiarity, of normalcy, of being normal, of being nobody. Man. Why do you think, for those of you who have conversed with me, why do you think I ask you questions rather than just talk about myself? It's because asking someone a question gives them the opportunity to speak and justify their existence and not be worthless, not be a nobody. And we value that because we are just nobodies. We are just dancing on biological strings, programmed strings, just like Joy was. But at the same time, we are still individuals, just like Joy. Although we are operating within our programming, we exercise agency and independence with what we have, with our limited scope. And although we cannot grasp the bigger picture, we are playing a part. We are contributing. Kay was neither his species' god nor their child. Just like you. But that's okay, because you and he both are individuals with agency, and you matter. You are both real human beings and Dorito heroes.